Horror has a lot of subgenres, so let's break them down. In this video, we're once again going to talk about 3 of them, as at this point I don't have as many books per these subgenres. So let's get going. The first of which is historical horror, which is again pretty self-evident. It is about some kind of historical event or just general time period, which plays a very prominent role in the book. The most famous example of this, I think, is The Terror by Dan Simmons, which is about the 1856 Northwest Passage, about these 2 ships that get stuck in the ice in Canada and are stalked by this Inuit creature. This is by far one of the best horror books I've ever read. Definitely read it. Dan Simmons does this a lot, such as also in Drood, which is about Charles Dickens' life as he's stalked by this terror. This is written through the perspective of Wilkie Collins, his friend and fellow author, who of course wrote The Woman in White. Another famous example of this is The Hunger by Alma Katsu, which is about the Donner Party as they move west and just all their trials and tribulations. In addition to The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, which is about Vlad Tepes, who is of course Vlad the Impaler, who is the inspiration for Dracula. So definitely pretty cool. And here's another one that doesn't exactly fit the horror, but I often see it in the horror subreddits and stuff, and that is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Again, not a horror book in itself, but plenty of horror in it. Next, we're going to move on to horror fantasy or fantasy horror. This is, again, horror that has a lot of dark fantasy elements of it. I don't have too many of this because those genres tend to be pretty split. But a pretty good example of this is just Neil Gaiman's works in general, such as Coraline, which I'm sure you may have seen in the movie, as well as Brom, Gerald Brahms, or Gerard Brom, one of the two. I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, but his books are dark fantasy type horror, such as like Slewfoot, which is about witches in colonial times. And then lastly is post-apocalyptic and dystopian horror, which I think you can probably guess what those are, as if you've read these in separate genres, such as The Stand by Stephen King, probably the most famous example of this, about a plague that wipes out the earth, as well its main competitor. These two are often compared, and that is Swan Song by Robert McCammon, which is about a nuclear apocalypse. And then lastly, a more modern example is Tender is the Flesh by Agostino Bastorica, which is a dystopian horror novel about cannibalism. So let me know what your favorites are in these subgenres.